Elaine, welcome to the W2 Prison Break Show. I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love the premise of the show and excited to have this conversation.
Excellent. And we're going to get right into your W2 Prison Break story, which is awesome. I'm going to let you tell it. You left the medical field. You were a doctor and you left to get into real estate. So please take it away and give us the details behind that.
Yeah. Probably one of the most, the biggest decision of my life and not one that I made lightly. So excited to share what that journey was like for me and my family. So many people helped me along the way, hearing the stories from others. So kind of long story short, I did go into medicine a little bit later than others. And I think that was pivotal because I saw medicine as a career. I do think there's, beautiful things in the healing professions. I felt very close with my patients. I felt like I was serving them a great deal. But I wasn't a person who, believed that she would be a doctor when I was 3 years old, 10 years old. I went to undergraduate school. I worked for a few years in AmeriCorps. I went to graduate school. I actually got a business degree, and I think that kind of planted some ideas in my mind. And then I went to medical school. And truth be told, kind of much of the way through, I felt like maybe medicine wasn't, quite for me. But you just kind of, in many of these professions, I'm sure, lots of people have experienced this. You just kind of get sucked into it. So at the end of medical school is when someone matches for residency. That's where they pick their specialty. They go off to a hospital and they train to, actually see patients. And even at that point, I had thought about potentially not going to residency and instead doing something maybe in administration or curriculum or medical teaching, something like that. And then ultimately decided that I was very, very interested in the human mind, and I did want to serve human beings. So I went to residency in psychiatry. I was so fortunate that I had the opportunity to match at the Mayo Clinic, which is consistently rated one of the best hospitals in the world. And I got to do my training there, which coincidentally was where my husband was born and had grown up. He hadn't lived there for 15 years. So that was also nice that during that transition, we were coming back to his hometown. We were able to live close to his mom for the last 6 years of her life. And then, the intent kind of in my mind, the vision I saw for our future is Nick had a career in tech. That's my husband, Nick. And we had been building a real estate portfolio, which I'm sure we'll talk about during our time here together. And I had this vision that one day we would have an office. I saw it so much in my mind. We would have an office, and on the left side would be the real estate office, and people, would come in from the street on the real estate office. And on the right side would be my psychiatry clinic. That's one of the beautiful things about psychiatry is you don't really need equipment. So it's still very easy to be an independent psychiatrist. And people would come in on the right side and I would see patients, and then like somewhere in the middle Nick and I would have an office and we would see each other during the day. And my vision was close. Turns out we both ended up doing real estate through COVID. So Nick left his career in tech in 2019, and that's his story to share, but happy to share tidbits of it here because it's related that both of us left six-figure careers. And I really thought I would practice medicine for at least 5 or 7 more years was kind of the thought. And it was in 2020. We already had 2 children. We had a baby in April of 2020. We all remember March of 2020 is when COVID was declared. And it just seemed like every other day that phone was ringing saying that the kids couldn't go to school, or it was daycare at that time because of COVID exposures. And I was just in so much pain because of that. The
Yeah.
kids weren't getting what they needed. We were kind of hobbling them along. I was having to cancel my patients left and right, which is a big deal, period, but particularly in that psychiatric relationship where a big part of that relationship is supposed to be stability. And we had this booming real estate business. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to step back from medicine. And I stepped back in October of 2020 and I postponed my contract for a year. I thought, hey, within a year, vaccines will come out, schools will be back to normal. I'll get back to medicine. And then at that point, it was so evident that I just loved running the business, loved especially running a business with my husband
Mhm.
and being able to just have that, that interface between family and business all day long. And then that was that. So, if you had asked me even in January of 2020, do you intend to leave medicine? I would have been very convicted that yes, that is coming in, say, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. I never would have guessed it would have come that year. And I think the lesson there for people listening is oftentimes the greatest leaps that we have in life come from pain. And when I look back now at, those crazy 7 months of COVID from March to October when I stepped back from medicine, I'm so grateful that there was so much pain in my life that forced me to make a decision that I knew I wanted to make, and it just really sped up the timeline.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And I'm looking at the calendar. It's hard to imagine it was 4 years ago when that
I
moment happened.
know.
It's like, wow, really, it's been that long. It went by very quickly. COVID impacted a lot of people, positive and negative. I had pain during COVID as well, but that's when I launched my real estate business and I was able to leave my job that same year. So great perspective there. You went through your office with such detail. We're going to talk a lot about vision here too, because you are a visioning expert. I want to get on this. I think people
Hmm.
miss this step and don't do this, but I'm sure you have way more detail than what you just shared. But you're like walking through the office and like this is over here,
Hmm.
this is over here. How important is that? And look, I struggle with that. Like I have vision boards. People watch on YouTube, you can see my wall, you can see this picture up here of a house that I want. Like I do that stuff.
Hmm.
But what you just did, I think, number one, it's not easy for me. I think it's hard for a lot of people. So could you expand on that more? Maybe give us some tips on how we can get to that level of detail that you just did.
Yeah, yeah. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So, oh my gosh, if I'm just blabbering in like 10 minutes, stop me. But basically, I think one of the beautiful things about being a psychiatrist who is now in business is I bring this understanding of the human mind and human development to business. And I really think that business is basically just a series of setting goals,
Mm.
understanding who it is that you're trying to serve, and then seeking to meet their needs. Unfortunately, that often brings out in our minds very analytical thinking, particularly say as someone is trying to make an emotional decision like stepping away from their career. They do so with analytical thinking of calendars and checklists and pros and cons lists, and maybe they even rank things, lots of calculations around income and bills and those sorts of things, when in reality, this is an identity question. It is an identity question of, am I a person who has left my career? Am I a person who will go out alone and start, whatever business is on your heart, or scale whatever business you're already working on? And that comes from vision. Humans are incredibly visual creatures. What separates us from all other animals is that we can see the future and then we can move toward that future, right? Think about like right now, what do you plan on doing after you're done listening to this podcast? Maybe you're driving and you're going to be walking into your office or walking into a grocery store. You can see that in your mind. Well, you can purposefully use that skill to get what you want. Everything that exists, right? This coffee cup that has this beautiful lid that you can't spill. Some human had to see this in their mind and not only think it and say, wouldn't it be nice if I had a coffee mug that didn't spill when I turned it over? But they also had to see the prototype in their head and then go out and create it. We can do that with physical things. We can do that with the future. And so when we're thinking about something as big as leaving W-2 employment, there's such a huge identity piece there. Seeing yourself on the day that you submit your resignation and really seeing it, not seeing it from an analytical perspective of, this is the day on the calendar, but seeing your own body. What does it look like as you walk in and say, deliver the resignation letter? What are you wearing? What are your facial expressions? Who's around you? What's the weather like? What's it like on that first day when you wake up and you're in bed? Like, see that you're laying in bed, the alarm just went off, the day is yours. And there's both excitement and a little terror in there of, okay, I have to go out and create something today because I don't get to just, show up at an employer and do the activities and get a paycheck. What do you look like? What does your room look like? Who's with you? What are you doing as you go through that day? What is it like 3 months later, 1 year later? I really like a 3-year time frame. I think that's
Mhm.
a really sweet spot for human cognition because it's far enough out that our mind doesn't offer up to us thoughts like, oh, well, that isn't possible, or I can't get that done. If we do say 6 months or 1 year, our mind is quick to say, I can't get that done that quickly, or I don't know, or I've tried before. But 3 years is far enough out that when our mind offers up those thoughts, it's kind of tempered by, well, I have 3 years to work with. That's a long time, right? Like we just talked about a 4 year time frame and how long 4 years feels to a human. Anything more than say 5 or 7 years starts to feel very wishy-washy.
Mm.
So many things can change in your personal life, children, where you live, technology, AI, all the things. So it gets a little harder to really vision more than say 5, 7, 10 years out. But 1 to 3 years is a really sweet spot. And it's probably for a lot of people listening about around the time that you would maybe be planning for your exit. And keep doing all of the analytical stuff. Keep doing the checklists and the calendars and the calculations and the pros and cons, but also add that emotional identity piece where you really try to visualize it, like as though you had watched a movie. And it's so important. Someone is going to die if you don't explain to someone else exactly what was in that movie. And you have no opportunity for them to see the movie because it's inside of you. You can only share the movie with them with your words. And so you have to be very vivid, creating it in your imagination. Once you've created it in your imagination, that's 80% of the work. Then 20% of the work is creating it in the future.
Mm. Wow.
I
That's
love it. I think this is a superpower, and all humans have it. We are born with this gift.
You do have it. You do have, we all have it. That's super deep. All right. I'm going to just pick this apart because I didn't think we would go here to this level, but I'm super interested in this. I know the audience is. Most people skip this. They just go to the analytical
Mhm.
phase. It's like you said, it's like, hey, is this going to make me money? Is this going to work? Am I going to get out of my job? I think this is much more difficult, and that's why we don't do the visioning piece. So, how did is were there any books that you read? Like, how do you get to the vision point, and then how often do we have to repeat the vision to make it to seem more real and to push us towards the 20% that you mentioned?
Yeah, two really good books are Vivid Vision by Cameron Harold. That book is more business focused, but just
Mhm.
read it from the lens that your life is your business. And then another book that I highly recommend is Be Your Future Self Now by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Many people know him for 10x is easier than 2x, but the Future Self book is also very, very, very good. And then I would say do this at least once a year. At least once a year when you're already doing your analytical goal setting, you're already saying, this is what I want in Q1, Q2, on and on. Instead of just writing it down and only using that part of our brains, that's our prefrontal cortex.
Mhm.
That's the youngest part of our brain. It's the most powerful, the most analytical, but it's not who we are as beings. It doesn't get into identity. It doesn't get into heart. It doesn't get into future. All of that is in the more ancient parts of our brains. And we tap into that by using our senses. So that's where visualization and really leaning into it, not seeing yourself like as a stick figure on, oh, on this day, I'm going to resign, but seeing yourself as a real being. Who are you with? What are you wearing? What are your facial expressions? What do you feel like? What songs are you listening to? Like it need not be, just the visual aspect. You can incorporate what you're hearing, what you're smelling, who's around you, how you feel, all of those modalities. And then, for me, I would say I practice it almost every day. And it need not be anything complex. It can be
Mhm.
something, like this show, for example. Who do I want to show up as? What energy do I want to have? So in the hour beforehand, as I'm, clearing my calendar and getting ready for the show, I also just take it's really like 2 or 3 minutes. And I just see myself speaking, having confidence, sharing my story, connecting, loving, serving. And that puts me into an energy that's very different than, oh, I have this thing at noon and I need to, check it off my list. So I would say people should lean into it as often as possible and just know that there's really no wrong way to do it.
Mhm.
Just visual, and you can practice with silly things of visualizing yourself walking around the grocery store. You probably know where everything is on your grocery store and you probably know what's on your list. If you visualize it beforehand, you train that part of your brain so that when you're trying to visualize the unknown, something like not having W-2 employment when maybe you've had that for all of your career,
Yeah.
by practicing visualizing the known, you get better at visualizing the unknown.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
There's no
And
wrong way to do it. Just practice.
practice, just like anything else. I think people don't do it because they don't know how to do it, and maybe they don't believe it. They're a little skeptical, and it's very easy to be analytical. But
Hmm.
I make a lot of sports references, and there's a reason why a lot of these athletes will close their eyes before they do something, like shoot a free throw
Absolutely.
or hit a shot or whatever, because they're visualizing the whole thing. Probably not to the level of detail that you just said because they don't have a lot of time, but that's a habit. And this is becoming more and more popular. And again,
Hmm.
something that people are missing out on. So great,
Hmm.
great tip
Yeah,
there on the two
it's
books.
great that
Yeah.
you brought that up because a lot of the visualization research has come from athletics. Comparing groups of people who say watch other people do free throws
Hmm.
versus doing them themselves versus visualizing it and visualizing it in their body, that they're the one standing at the line, they're the one holding the ball, they're the one moving their arm, doing all of the motions. The group that does visualization performs better than the group who actually does the activity, which doesn't seem right. Like we've been taught our whole lives, get out and actually do something. The power of visualization is so good at creating our ideal future that we create that in our nervous systems. Whereas if we're, say, standing at the line and we keep making mistakes as we're doing those free throws, that's what we drill into our nervous system. So if we first visualize shot after shot after shot of perfect free throws, and this is a peer-reviewed study. This isn't me creating this.
Yeah.
Visualization was first studied in athletics, so it's great that you brought that up. Those folks will have better outcomes in the game than the folks who actually practiced. It's crazy, but that's the gift that we have as humans, to visualize the future and then make it a reality.
It really is almost not believable, but I do believe it. I do believe it.
Hmm.
There's a reason they're doing it. I mean, this isn't like they're just, hey, we're just testing this out. Like it's actually working for them and quieting the mind. Okay, awesome stuff. Is there anything that maybe we left out while we're teaching people how to create a vision? Because again, people are not doing this and they're just leading with the analysis part. And sometimes they're picking the wrong business. Sometimes they're picking the wrong path. You got clear on that. And that made, I think, your decision to leave the practice of medicine much easier for you. Because I was going to ask you, like, hey, what were some of the roadblocks and the obstacles that you faced in the early beginning? I wanted to get to that, but I just want to make sure we didn't leave anything on the table here with the vision practice.
I would just say to people, just go out and do it, right? Whatever you're doing at the end of listening to this podcast, as long as
Mhm.
you're not driving, right? You obviously don't want to do this while you're driving, but just stop and do it. Just think about something simple of what do you have on your calendar for this evening, and what would make it a great success? Anything, hanging out with family, catching up on work, taking care of your physical health, whatever it is, visualize it in your mind. What would make it a perfect activity? What would make it so that when you go to bed tonight, you feel like, wow, that was a really great evening? Practice that, see what that feels like, and then check in with yourself as you're going to bed and say, did the visualization help me to be more of who I wanted to be in these activities? And then take that. I promise you, you will feel success. And then ask yourself, wow, if I can do that with something as simple as just my routine daily activities this evening, imagine how powerful this could be creating my future life. And then just visualize it.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like you're doing this a lot during the day. You're encouraging
I do.
people just like, hey, practice. Like go walk to the grocery store at first, or maybe visualize what it's like driving there or whatever it is and build that muscle, which a lot of us don't have.
Hmm.
Do you have, is it something that you like your vision, like your 3-year vision? Is that something that you like to do right when you wake up? Is there a certain, like, is it part of your routine? Do you have a trigger that's set up for that?
I do. So I've gotten more, let's say, disciplined with my visioning over the years.
Mhm.
So now what I do is I do a 3-year vision about every year. So I don't wait a full 3-year cycle before doing the next vision because a lot changes in that year one. So it's always the 3-year rolling vision. And then I read it about once per week. And that takes maybe 5 or 7 minutes. And obviously, as the weeks go on, I can read it faster and faster because I basically have it memorized. A pro tip that I've not done yet, but that many people have encouraged me to do, is record it. And then you can hear it in your own voice, listening to it, almost as like your own private podcast. For me, I read it because I'm such a visual person, ha ha ha, that reading it is very powerful for me. But just reminding myself, this is who I am. And the things that seemed crazy when I wrote it, they don't seem so crazy the 10th time I've read it, the 20th time I've read it, the 45th time I've read it, right? Just like anything in life, when we're exposed to it over and over, we start to bring it into our nervous systems. And then, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that is me. I am capable of doing that. That is my identity. Whereas
Yeah.
in the beginning, it feels like it's the future. And then as you keep reading it, keep moving toward it, you attune your nervous system.
Mm.
Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between something that you've visualized and something that's already happened. So when you visualize it over and over and over, your body's like, well, yeah, of course that's who I am. And then you start to have behaviors to create that reality.
Totally. Okay. I love the record part. And by the way, I've done that and it works. So I've recorded like a yearly statement, not a 3 year. I'm going to do that, but a future statement. Hey, December 31st, 2024, what does it look like? I listen to it every day. It's me talking like everything
Hmm.
happened. One year I did that. It was almost every single thing I had come true. And
Mm-hmm.
there's got to be some validity to there is validity to the
Absolutely.
fact that so good that you brought that up. Record it. What about maybe if you did like a video and watch the video of you talking? Would that because you keep saying movie? Maybe that would that be helpful? Do you think?
Mm-hmm. I think anything that can make it more real, right? Whatever the modality is for you that
Sure.
will get you to where you're getting into that future mode
Hmm.
as often as possible. I find for me about once a week is a good cadence. But maybe if you're, listening to it, it's just something that you're playing in the car or something you're playing, when you're showering or something in the morning. But anything that really attunes your nervous system to this is who I am, you will find yourself effortlessly moving in that direction. Just like you said, when you look at that list on the last day of the year, it's like, oh,
Hmm.
that happened and that happened. Oh, and that too, and that one too. There's real science behind that we become who we tell ourselves we are.
I love it. Okay, great, Elaine. Listen, we started talking about your awesome real estate business and you leaving your job, and then we're leaving everybody hanging on the edge of the seat here. But this is important. We just talked about. Um, you were doing the real estate business alongside both of you? Like maybe talk a little bit about that, and then how easy was the decision to leave, and then what, maybe some challenges, maybe just some tips. Because again, most people can't even get to that point of scaling the side business and then, hey, this is my full-time thing now. It's pretty daunting,
Yeah.
leaving six-figure jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick and I started investing in real estate right when we first got married. We had heard from many mentors who were a generation ahead of us that that's what we should do. We both came from very, very poor families. And so having financial stability in our marriage and with, at that time, our future children was very important to us. So we were very comfortable with living very lean and putting as much money as we possibly could into our real estate portfolio. We also loved working very hard. We would do sweat equity remodels until, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and then go back to work the next morning. That did slow down once we had some kids. And, at that point, we had scaled enough that we were able to hire contractors and those sorts of things. But we knew that we were working for the future. And I've talked a lot about the future here. When we first started investing, I didn't have this skill of really seeing the future. It was much more nebulous. I just had some sense of, oh, if we keep buying houses and keep fixing them up and keep doing a cash out refi, eventually we'll have a lot of houses. And I bet if we have a lot of houses, things will be okay for us. So it was much less purposeful in the very beginning years than I am now with my goal setting. And then we started to do some financial modeling of, how many dollars per year are we earning from each of our rental properties? How much faster could we grow the portfolio if
Mhm.
Nick was out of his career in tech? Along the way, Nick got his real estate license. We started a property management company. We've always managed our own assets. And then we started managing assets for others along the way. So he left his career in 2019. And the thing I would say there is, very tactically, what I find is that people will think that in order to leave their W-2, they need to replace their entire salary. And there's some validity to that. But I also would encourage people to really think like, what is your bare bones shoestring budget? For us, it was our housing, which was a very modest house, basic transportation, health insurance was a big one for us. At that point, we had several children and we're hoping for more, basic food, one simple vacation per year, basically just a really simple life. But what we told ourselves was when we hit this dollar, which for us at that time was like 85,000 per year, which was far less than our actual incomes at that time.
Uh-huh.
But when we hit this dollar amount, we'll be able to live a shoestring budget, a very, very simple life, but Nick will have his freedom. And we'll figure out how to make the rest once he has that freedom. He'll wake up in the morning with a fire under his butt that will, motivate him to figure things out. And when you have more time and white space, you come up with more ideas. So I would encourage people to lower the floor of how you define financial independence to basically the lowest that you feel comfortable with. For me, it was like housing and health insurance and everything else, and then you can add. The amount of passive income we have today is many, many, many times larger than what we had then. But that gave us our freedom. And I think if we had said, oh, we'll cut back, or we'll leave our W-2 employment once we've replaced all of our income, it would have been many, many more years. And the amount of passive income that we created accelerated once we had more free time to dedicate to doing so, right? So we would have slowed down the years that it took to get into that exponential growth phase. So that's a tactical thing that I really encourage people to do is come up with that bare bones budget, work toward that, set yourself free. Know that if you have that entrepreneurial heart, you will go out and find ways to create value to increase your income. And then the other thing I would add from a real estate perspective is each borrower can get 10 conventional loans, 20 conventional loans for a married couple, assuming you separate your loans.
Mm-hmm.
Of all of the investors we've ever worked with, I've never met any couple that's been able to get all 20 of them, but I have met many couples that can get 12, 14, 15 before the underwriting gets too complex. It was very important for Nick that he have all 10 of his conventional loans before he left his W-2 employment, because that was the base of our portfolio. So for someone who's specifically using real estate investing to create your freedom, just think about timing your exit around when you have your conventional loans. That can be either 10 single family homes, or you can get up to a quad with a conventional loan. So theoretically, that could be 40 doors on your conventional loan bucket that's allocated to every borrower from the government, and then 20 for a married couple if they each get their loans separately. So Nick had his whole 10, and then we had that base of about 85,000 per year. And then that's when he left. And then something I'll share, just as an example of what's possible, is in the week that Nick left his career, you certainly wake up in the morning with a sense of, what do I do next?
Yeah.
How do I fill the gap, right?
Right.
He earned an entire year's salary in 1 week. And I think that's possible for anyone. You just have to have enough fire under you to say, how do I go out and create this much value? So he was a real estate agent. And for years, we had turned down people for doing property management. We even had this little skit that, well, we love children, but we don't want to open a daycare. So we love doing our own portfolio, but we don't want to manage any properties for anyone else. Well, now that he had all this free time, he said, you know what, I could manage properties for other people. So he called every person that he had said no to and said, here's how we'll do it. This is the service that I'm offering. This is my fee schedule. This is what makes it work for me. If you want to buy a house, I'm happy to represent you as an agent, and then our property management company will serve you. And of course, like, not all the income was realized that week, but he got all the houses under contract that replaced his whole year income in 1 year. The income didn't continue at that pace through the whole year. So I don't want to paint a picture of, just too
Yeah.
much sunshine and roses. But think about how much, like, first he had freedom. On Monday, he had freedom. The following Monday, he had real freedom, because not only did we already have our baseline number from our portfolio, we knew that just from closing the deals that he had gotten under contract, that we would have a whole year's income coming in the next couple of weeks as those closings happened.
Yeah.
And so that gave him so much emotional freedom to then go out and say, I basically have a whole year that I can just explore in the business and figure out what else can we do? How else can we serve people? How else can we add value? How else can we invest? How else can we grow the portfolio? And even if I don't make another single penny for a full year, I already have everything I need. And that was just such a transformative experience. And when I've shared that story with many people, it's not as uncommon as people would think. I think as humans, we get a little adrenaline when, it's on our shoulders to go out
Mhm.
and create. And we find that these areas of, inspiration and work ethic and creativity and connections that we didn't know were possible when our time is entirely ours to work with.
Yeah. What a great share. I agree with you. There's four take. I was writing down a bunch of notes while you were talking. There's four takeaways I took from that I just want to make the audience aware of because I hear this a lot. This is repetitive. Number one, because we're talking about leaving your job to get to
Mm-hmm.
to get to your business, live lean. That was number one I wrote down.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are not willing to do that. Number two, hard work. This is not easy. Okay. You are not going to just fall out of bed and quit your job because you visualized it. You still have to do the work.
That's right.
Number three, delayed gratification. This did not happen to you guys overnight. This took some time. And the fourth one was what you just talked about. 1 week of focused work can do wonders for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, especially when you're working
Mm-hmm.
for yourself and you don't have to share the income with your boss. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And that is not all that uncommon. And when you're working for yourself, that is the tremendous upside. I don't have to give this money to anybody else. This all comes to us as the business owners, and you can charge more. And again, you're not clouded. He's not clouded by his 9 to 5. So just really awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when did you what was the year that you thought there was COVID? Yes?
Yeah, so Nick left his career in tech in July of 2019, and then I left medicine in October of 2020. And
Mhm.
when both of us were rowing in the same direction, despite how hard it was with COVID and the three children and all of the things, that's when the business really accelerated. So that's when we moved into doing joint ventures. We eventually launched our first private equity fund in December of 2021. We basically figured out that my superpower was connecting and raising capital. Nick's superpower was placing that capital and running our property management company. And it was, just basically putting another strong rower in the boat. And so we thought the boat was going fast. And then when both of us were in the boat, wow, was that fun.
Yeah.
And then it's also just fun. Like we both had a doctor's appointment this morning. And then after that, we went and got a quick breakfast together. Nothing crazy, 20, 25 minutes. But there was a day when it would have been impossible for me to have a nice breakfast with my husband at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. And now it's like, hey, of course, we talk about the kids, talk about our schedule this evening, check in with each other on the different areas of the business that we take care of. And that's just so fun. It was that vision that I saw years ago. I was a little off. I thought that I'd be running my medical practice next to his real estate practice. Turns out we're both doing real estate, but I knew that that was what I wanted. I
Mm.
wanted not only freedom for my own self, I wanted freedom inside of our family. This summer our oldest is 8.5, and there's 2 weeks where for various reasons we don't have childcare or summer camps for 3 days. And we're like, I think she's old enough that she could hang with our maintenance guys for a few days. And we'd have to tell them to do like the boring tickets, the leaky faucets and that sort of thing. We can't be having her up on roofs and crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that'd be pretty cool. That's really neat. That's something that wasn't available to us inside
Mm.
of a typical corporate medical structure. So there's all these different things that, like, you have some sense that they'll happen, but when they happen, they're just so sweet and they're so worthwhile. And exactly like you say, there's delayed gratification here, right? This took us over 10 years to make a reality, but every single day of hard work was worth it so that we can live the life that we live today. We get to be together, we get to be with our children, we get to lead a team of 50 full-time employees here in Rochester, 30 full-time employees in Tacoma, which is our second headquarters. We get to serve hundreds of investors, thousands of residents. Like and we can see it with our own eyes. Like we created this. I think like many entrepreneurs, we think of our business almost as another one of our children.
Yeah.
You get so invested in the growth of your business.
I love it. I love it. And what are you doing with, because you said you mentioned the 10 loans per person, so you started with single family. Have you pivoted from that model or are you doing this? What are you doing now with your real estate business? And I know you have property management as well.
Yeah. So we still do single family. Now we have about 1,300 doors. We have about 1,000 here in Rochester, Minnesota, about 300 in Tacoma, Washington. We do single family and large multifamily. We're vertically integrated. So we broker our own deals, renovate them, manage them. We even in the past, in 2023, when interest rates were high, we slowed down our acquisition. So we deepened our vertical integration. We now do our own cleaning, our own lawn, our own snow, basically just as any of the services that our buildings need to thrive. We're adding that to our vertical integration. And our business model has always stayed the same. Since that very first real estate investment, our business model has always been, how can we buy something, fix it up, improve the management, add enough value that we can do a cash out refi in 5 years or less, get to an infinite rate of return, keep that original property, have the original capital. When it was our capital, we reinvested it in the next thing. Now that we're inside of a private equity structure, we return that capital to our investors. They can decide to reinvest in the next thing or put a kid through college, whatever it is they need to do with that money, and then do it again and again and again. So all the way back from the very first deal until deals we're doing today, it's always been that same business plan.
Stick with what works.
Yep. And
Yeah.
create a snowball, right? So we never flipped. We thought we joke the name of our company is Black Swan Real Estate, and we should have named it Golden Goose Real Estate. We totally missed the name. We've never slayed a golden goose. Why would we? With the power of a cash out refi, such great leverage is available in real estate. We just do a cash out refi. And it's also incredibly tax advantageous to harvest equity via a cash out refi versus a sale. Keep all of those properties, do subsequent cash out refis as the market allows, and then have all of those geese laying eggs every single month, and then just keep adding more geese to the pipeline.
Yeah. You've built up something quite tremendous with your husband over the 10 years plus, and you're just still doing the same thing, sticking with what works and adding.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. But that's so hard for so many people to do for 1 year, let alone 10 years, right? Not get
Mm-hmm.
distracted, shiny object syndrome. Um, you believe in charity too. We were talking a little bit about that. You do donate proceeds to charity. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what's important to you?
Yeah. So in 2021, we created the Stageberg Family Foundation. And that was just such a passion project for me. So at that time, we were really interested in running our property management company, running our asset management company, raising capital, doing deals. A lot of folks were asking us for real estate coaching. And it's very hard to run an operational business and also run a coaching business. To be a good coach, you really have to put a lot of effort to it. And it just really wasn't on our hearts. But people kept asking for it, kept asking for it, kept asking for it. So I had this epiphany one day. I said, you know what? I'll create an evergreen course that's basically like the cookbook. It's the cookbook of basically how we created this business, how we do real estate investing. I'll put it out into the world. 100% of revenue will go to a foundation that I had to create the foundation. And that's what made it so fun for me because
Mm.
then I was able to serve people who wanted to learn from me. I was able to create this thing and I was able to use it to create profit for my nonprofit that I could then place into the community. If I was just doing this for profit for the business, it wouldn't have had that for me, right? We were already making so much money in the real estate business. I didn't need another service offering. But when it was for someone else, that's when it became so interesting. So we've built a playground here in Rochester. We've renovated the kitchen of the local homeless shelter from like a 1970s regular residential kitchen to a fully fledged commercial kitchen. We've donated to the only family-based homeless shelter here in Rochester where people can go with their children to basically help them renovate a duplex. Lots of other projects that we've completed over the years. And it's just so fun to see good that's created in so many different ways. Starting a foundation is quite easy, especially if you have what's called a non-operational foundation. So what that means is my foundation raises money and then I give it to other 501(c)(3)s who are operational. So my foundation can't like just give money directly to, say, a family who's struggling with housing, but it can give it to the homeless shelter in town, and then they can spend the money. If someone who's thinking of starting a foundation can spin it up with the IRS, doing the simplified version of a non-operational charity, and
Mhm.
can be approved in, I mean, probably like a week or so. So if that's on your heart, go out and do it. Make it something formal, make it a part of your life. It's, we list it same as all of the entities in our company of, okay, what's the business plan for the foundation this year? How much money do we want to raise? How are we going to spend it? What impact are we going to have? And it's a way to keep it all fun, right? If it's all just to add zeros at this point, that's not any fun.
Mm.
But if it's to serve people, to serve our team members, our investors, our residents, and then to give back in the community, like when I drive past that playground that we created, I feel as awesome about that as any of our real estate investments. I'm like, we created that. And not just we, the Stagebergs, we, the people who invested in the course, who took that and then learned how to do real estate investing for their own selves. And then that money went into the foundation that then created the playground.
Awesome. I love that. And it connects to back to your upgrading too, your helping, right? So
Mhm.
I love that. Good stuff. Great stuff. Where can we go to learn more about you and your amazing business that you've built?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the best place to reach us is blackswanteam.com. Black like the color, swan like the bird, blackswanteam.com. That's our website, tells you more about us, our history, our portfolio. You can sign up for our newsletter. We have a monthly teaching call that we do called Community Power Hour. We teach on various real estate topics. Those are recorded and sent out to our mailing list as well. We have
Awesome.
our quarterly updates. We have an event here in Rochester every year. All of that's right there on the website, blackswanteam.com.
I love it. We're gonna leave that link in the show notes. You have to write all that down. I would encourage you to check that out. Elaine, this has been tremendous. You're awesome. A
Thank
lot
you.
of
It's been fun.
good stuff here. I've learned more about visioning and the importance of this. And you're just a great person. So thank you for coming on. As we
Thank you for
wrap up
having me.
here, of course, anything you want to leave us with, any final thoughts? I always give our guests an opportunity to leave us with something that I didn't maybe ask you.
Yeah. I think the thing that comes to mind at my phase of life, so I'm 38, Nick's 40, and the thing that we're kind of swirling with in this phase of life is what we can accomplish. The saying is we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but we underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. And I think that ties so closely to making a decision to leave W-2 employment, or even just to, drastically cut back. Something that's a year away may feel like, oh, that's too close, or I can't do it, or that's not for me, or whatever. Our mind offers us all sorts of limiting beliefs. Try your best to quiet the mind and know that with years of time, if you set your sights on something, right? If you do that visualization and you say, this is who I am going to be in this time frame, the chances are very, very high that you will get there, because you will start looking for things in your environment. Just like you're listening to this show, you're programming yourself, you're telling yourself, this is part of my identity. And there's just so much beauty in time, and doing the dance there, that we don't allow that to make us lazy or get us into analysis paralysis or get us into procrastination, but coming at time from a place of grace, that with enough time, the goals that you set for yourself in life, you will be able to achieve them.
Beautiful. Well said. When is the book coming out? Is what I want to know. You don't have to answer that. Okay. Um, everyone, Elaine, thanks again. Everyone, make it a super awesome day. I'll see you soon.